and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. One-on-one with Mayor Brandon Johnson as he marks 2 years in office. We discuss funding threats from the Trump administration, crime prevention efforts, building more affordable housing, and more. But first, some of today's top stories. Illinois joins 20 other states in suing the Trump administration over immigration conditions placed on federal funding. The lawsuit claims the administration is attempting to illegally coerce states into enacting sweeping immigration enforcement. If states don't comply, the administration has threatened to withhold billions in federal funding for emergency services and infrastructure. The lawsuit comes as Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker is set to testify before Congress next month on laws designed to protect undocumented immigrants. And we have more background on this story on our website. Former alderperson Carrie Austin could withstand a federal corruption trial if given access to medical care during the day. That's the testimony of a Northwestern medicine pulmonologist to a federal judge today in a hearing over whether Austin is too sick to stand trial. Dr. Susan Russell confirmed that Austin is under increased risk of her obstructive pulmonary disorder worsening during the trial, but still would not meet the legal standard for calling the trial off. The 75-year-old has had a history of heart problems, breast cancer, and other illnesses over her years. A judge is set to rule on this issue June 13th. Cook County officials are celebrating the grand opening of a community law office in Roseland. The Freedom Defense Center is partnering with 4 local organizations to provide services like legal representation and expungement assistance, as well as mental health support, housing, and arts programming. The center is open weekdays by appointment only. Early childhood workers in Chicago are set to get a pay bump. Officials say about 3,000 early childhood care and early education workers will get a salary increase after a $7 million investment from the city. City says the money aims to bring early childhood workers' pay closer to the broader K-12 education workforce. Workers at 86 agencies funded by the city will see a cost per child increase in their salaries starting in July. City officials say that averages to a 5 to 10% increase in wages. Up next, Mayor Johnson at the 2-year mark. He joins us right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Mayor Brandon Johnson is marking 2 years in office. He took the reins of Chicago government at a time when the city was still recovering from a global pandemic, local crime rates were making national headlines, and police stations were filling up with asylum seekers. And while the city has made moves to address those issues, other challenges have emerged, like a worsening financial picture and federal funding threats from the Trump administration. Joining us now with more is the mayor, Brandon Johnson. Mayor, welcome back. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brandis.
So you've told reporters that you were elected to disrupt the status quo. Have you done that?
We have. You know, as you mentioned in your intro, we were faced with a global international crisis, quite frankly, that the federal government really left cities in peril. We responded to that crisis as we've had, you know, in the past with the full force of government. Asylum seekers sleeping on floors in police districts. We were able to rectify that situation, create a one system initiative where we built an incredible shelter space where now we have 126% increase in our shelter beds. And for the first time in a decade, not a single family is on a waiting list. Violent crime is down in the city of Chicago. In fact, the month of April was the fewest amount of homicides since 1962. And we increased our youth employment and workforce, something that I promised that I would do. We've also reopened mental health clinics, something that hasn't been done since Mayor Harold Washington. And again, all of this is a culmination of us transforming the city of Chicago. Now, is it moving at the pace in which I want? Of course not. I would like to see things move with more expediency, but we are certainly headed in the right direction.
When you took office 2 years ago, Chicago was in the midst of a humanitarian crisis, as we've mentioned, caused by the arrival of the 50,000 asylum seekers hoping to build a new life here in Chicago. Instead, many of them found what was already sort of a tattered social safety net and deep fissures between the Black and Latino communities. How do you repair the breach between Black and Latino communities?
Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge it, right? For Black Chicago in particular, on the west and south sides of our beloved city, disinvestment has been the prevailing form of governance. School closures, the shuttering of public housing, the loss of jobs, the attack on public education as a whole, right? These are, systemic challenges that have been embraced by previous administrations. And so what I've done to rectify that, of course, we just settled a teacher's contract, one of the most significant contracts that we've settled in the history of our public schools, protecting veteran teachers, making sure that we're lowering class sizes, protecting Black history, ensuring that there's pay equity across the board. The other thing that we're doing is we're building more affordable homes. This is the way in which we actually repopulate the west and south sides of the city of Chicago, but really repopulate the city with working people. We've built 4,000 of them, 1,800 under construction, another 4,600 within the next 18 months, right? And so between building more affordable homes, investing in our public schools, increasing opportunities for workforce, we have to show up for the people of Chicago, and that's exactly what I've done.
Well, and all that said, Mayor, obviously the number of migrants who are arriving, largely, of course, being from South America, Spanish-speaking nations, they're all Latino. The Black communities in this city felt like by spending time and money on setting these folks up, when Black communities had largely experienced so much disinvestment, felt like they were being ignored during that time of crisis. That relationship seemed to fray between those two communities. What can be done to put those two sort of back together or to bridge any divide?
Well, again, as I've said, that frustration is something that I've felt, over decades in this city, where previous administrations have ignored the west and south sides of the city. We didn't do that. We responded to a global crisis. Our city was attacked by the governor of Texas, where he spent over $200 million to send asylum seekers to cities like Chicago. He was very intentional about that. But we rose above that attack. We had the faith community, the philanthropic community, the business community, the full force of government that responded to that crisis. But we did not ignore the west and south sides of the city of Chicago. We continued to build affordable homes. Our workforce, particularly with our youth employment, we expanded that. Our community colleges, investing in our community colleges. The number one subgroup of registrants in our city colleges are young Black men, right? Those investments did not stop. Now, again, our city was attacked by the governor of Texas, and the federal government left us to fend for ourselves. And we were able to break through that. And the way we actually repair those relationships is that we have to continue to show up for working people. And that's exactly what my administration has done.
In that crisis, looking back, would you have done anything differently?
I mean, of course, right? I mean, there are, challenges, of course, that I had to respond to in that moment that, coming into this office, it's not something that we were anticipating. But here's what we were able to do. We took a crisis and built a one system initiative out of it. 70% of those individuals that are unhoused are Black families. We've increased our shelter beds year to year by 126%. So even in the midst of that crisis, our city was under attack. I managed that crisis without the support of the federal government. And even through that crisis, again, our shelter beds for families that we've increased, we are creating pathways for long-term sustainability by building more affordable homes. The $1.25 billion investment for housing and economic development to respond to the needs on the west and south sides of Chicago, it's the largest investment in the history of Chicago. So we did not lose our way because of this crisis. In fact, we strengthened our way because we proved that you can respond to an international global crisis without the help of the federal government, being attacked by a right-wing Republican governor in Texas while still making critical investments on the south and west sides.
Moving on, Governor J.B. Pritzker is appearing next month before the U.S. House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, as you did about Illinois' sanctuary policy and laws, as you appeared, of course, about the city status. Have you and the governor, have you discussed your experience, and what advice would you give him?
Well, we did talk about it, and I think it's important that the people of the city of Chicago come to appreciate that the policy that was signed in the state of Illinois was signed by the Republican Governor Bruce Rauner, right? And so the sanctuary state or the welcoming city operation that we hold to in this city, in this state, simply states that we do not behave, our local law enforcement, we do not force them to behave as federal agents, right? It's important that local law enforcement builds community trust. And so I shared with him, that it's important for us to reiterate our values, and I fully expect him to do that.
Chicago and Illinois are, as we know, both in President Trump's crosshairs. Are you concerned that any strife between you and the governor might weaken the city and the state when it comes to the attention that they are both getting from the president?
Look, me and the governor have worked hard over the 2 years that I've been in office to build a one system initiative. He added it to his budget this year. I was in Springfield. We received assurances that he's committed to that structure. We responded to an international global crisis. I think both of us understand that in order for this country to get on the right track, it's going to require clear vision from Democratic leadership, because we're clearly not getting that from the Republican Party. And so I've built strong relationships between the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, the Cook County Board President, Governor Pritzker, and leaders across this state to ensure that our value system, standing up and fighting for working people, that we never lose sight of our ultimate objective, which is to protect working people.
Chicago's facing another crisis, of course, this one caused by we mentioned there's several crises, Mayor, and this one is caused by the looming budget gap of nearly $1 billion caused by, the city's longstanding financial woes. President Donald Trump, again, attempting to yank $3.5 billion in federal aid. That's from the city alone, let alone what is expected to go to CTA and CPS. What did you learn from those incredibly tough negotiations this previous budget go-round?
Well, here's the important thing here is that no one will be surprised, right, by the fact that, government across the country is dealing with deficit, right? It's not just the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois. We're talking about local and state government across this country. And what I've done is that I put together this working group through this executive order to bring people to the table. One of the things that I did learn, not just during this budget process, but as mayor of one of the largest economies in the world, that I have to do a much better job communicating to the people of this city what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I have to engage people earlier, right? We've had engagements, but we need to do it earlier, and we have to do it more frequent. And that's what we're doing. And this working group is bringing together business leaders, civic leaders, political leaders, labor leaders, community-based organizations, so forth and so on, bringing all of the experts to the table so that we can have an open dialogue about how we can move forward. We're not going to solve this in isolation. It's going to take all of us, and that's the experience that I'm bringing to this conversation to ensure a pathway forward.
Last month, you warned that the city will have to do more with less. The budget deficit, more than $1 billion this year, and Trump, as we mentioned, threatening to withhold money. What will that look like? What will it look like to do more with less?
Well, first of all, I think we have to just make this point very clear, is that we have to do everything in our power to protect working people, and we cannot have a conversation that starts with cuts and furloughs and layoffs, right? What is important in this moment is that there are multiple options that we do have, considerations that all of us have to battle through to ensure that we're finding ways in which we can expand revenue in the city of Chicago, while also finding ways in which we can create more productivity. There are some areas in government that I've paid closer attention to, of course, as mayor, much different when I was a Cook County commissioner or an organizer, but paid much closer attention to how we find more productivity within government. We saw it last year where we had 3% cuts across the board without cutting services or laying people off. So what's going to be required in this moment, and what we're going to do differently, again, is we're bringing all of our stakeholders to the table to have substantive conversations about all of the options that we have to consider as a city.
You've touted the drop in the number of homicides. You just mentioned them, also the number of shootings since you've taken office. To what do you attribute that decrease, and how do you keep up that kind of progress?
Well, one of the first things that I did when I became mayor, I brought all of our leadership in within our police department, and we begin to look at where are the most violent beats in the entire city of Chicago. There's about 35 of them, because my rationale was if we can come together with a strategy and an understanding of what's happening in those particular beats, if we can do that in those beats, we can apply it everywhere in the city of Chicago. So we looked at beats where the violence was high, where schools were closed, where unemployment was high, and we begin to take the full force of government in those particular beats, and we've seen a precipitous decline in violence in those 35 beats. And so the attribution—
say the full force of government, what beyond CPD is happening?
Thank you for that question. And so what that means is we had to show up with job opportunities. We have to show up with city services just to make sure that the blocks were clean. So we were trimming trees and boarding up abandoned buildings. These are conditions or the environment that sometimes leads to greater violence, right? So creating job opportunities, making sure that city services were available in those spaces. And again, going back to building more affordable homes and investing in our young people. On the west side of Chicago, you know, I'm raising my family in Austin. My wife and I, we love the Austin neighborhood, and you know, there's no debate. Everybody knows the west side is the blessed side, but it has been a side of town that has been neglected for decades. Now, we hired young people for summer jobs, created 29,000 of them for this summer. Last year, there was a decline in violence in the 15th Police District, which is the Austin neighborhood, but it was also the same neighborhood that hired the most amount of young people, almost 1,700 youth jobs. So there's a direct correlation between summer youth jobs, building more affordable homes, showing up with the full force of government to make sure that there's cleanliness in the community, that people know that we care. And that's the heart of my administration, that I care deeply for the people of the city. And the way you do that is you show up with city services.
All that said, there is still concern about the so-called teen trends or takeovers and the debate about the curfew, and should changes be made to the curfew in order to reduce that, to reduce some of that activity if and when it gets out of hand. Where are you on that, and what would you like to see done?
Keeping people safe is my top priority. And I just want to lean into this a little bit more, is because many people said when I was running for office, you know, Mayor Johnson, you have to prioritize community safety. And we've done that. And that's why there's been a decline in homicides and shootings, our robbery strategy. When it comes to young people, we have to ensure that there's accountability, but that there's also opportunity. There's nowhere, anywhere, with any sort of research that indicates lowering curfew is going to create safer communities. And so what we are ultimately working to do is to prevent these teen trends and these gatherings from happening in the first place. One of the things that we're doing is that we're working with community violence interrupters, we're working with community organizations, we're working with the Chicago Police Department. Again, the full force of government showing up to make sure that we're course correcting. I'll give you one testimony. There was a young person who was promoting these gatherings online. Found him, talked to him. One of our alders actually employed him. And now he's no longer participating in that type of activity. He's actually showing up to provide productive, safe spaces for our young people to gather. No one in this city cares more about young people than a mayor who has the responsibility to keep everyone safe. As a former public school teacher, as a father of 3 beautiful children, 10, Ethan just turned 13 yesterday. My oldest is 17. He's preparing to leave for college in a couple of years. He's a junior. And what I want for my children, I want for every single child. And so that's why creating these spaces with young people to activate them, to find spaces where they can be safe, but also preventing these gatherings from happening, that's where I stand on this issue.
Happy birthday to Ethan. The shakeups at Chicago Public Schools, in part, those have also defined your first term, and I know that you are celebrating, of course, the CTU contract, but the district needs a CEO, and what is your understanding of how that new CEO is chosen?
The CEO of the Chicago Public Schools, the future CEO, has to share my values, fully funding and supporting our neighborhood schools. That's why this contract was so important, because it's setting us up for the type of transformation that the school district has longed for decades. Now we have lower class sizes. That's good for the 5 and 6 year olds who are going into our classrooms. We also have, added more support to protect our veteran teachers. At a time in which the federal government is attacking public employees, we're protecting them. And so the new CEO has to share that value system of working people in this city.
Your current chief of staff, Christina Pacioni-Zayas, perhaps?
Well, look, I have not made an ultimate decision. Here's what I can assure people, is that the next CEO will share the value system that I ran on. As a public school teacher, as a beneficiary of public education, someone who sends my children to the Chicago Public Schools, no other mayor has that record. And so I'm going to have someone in position who understands that I was elected to transform this school district, and that's exactly what we're doing, and that's what we're going to do moving forward.
You've mentioned your family several times. How are they?
Yeah, thank you.
You've just had a birthday, one's going to college, we know that much, in a couple of years, not yet.
Well, first of all, I will say that, my wife and I, this is so humbling for us. To be able to serve the working people of this city has been the joy and honor of our life, and the family as well. I can't express how grateful I am for the village that has surrounded my family and provided support. My oldest, in fact, is in a varsity game right now over at Lane Tech. So as soon as I leave here, I'm going to go check him out. And Ethan just turned 13, and Braden, she is, the apple of my eye. And my wife and I are so honored and privileged to have such beautiful children who have their own lives, and we have so many people who look out for us.
We've talked about this, but we also know, current public discourse. We hear from Michelle Obama and her new relationship with the public, and how she's no longer doing the things that you would think she's obligated to do the way she had to do for 8+ years. And we know that your wife is a largely private woman. And I don't know if she'd had her druthers if you'd be here right now, but how is she handling the spotlight that searches for her?
She is the rock of our family, and 26 years of love, and she is truly the dream of what I wanted in a wife. I think what's something that most people don't know about her is that she has been working quietly around environmental justice. She's been working quietly around making sure that maternal health is protected. She was a doula before, I kind of disrupted that a little bit.
But why quietly? Why not use her position and her platform to get loud about the issues that are important to her?
So my wife is someone who seeks results and not attention. I think that's the beauty of her. And you mentioned our former First Lady Michelle Obama, and she talked about how important it was to protect her children. My wife has that same sentiment, and I will say this though, she advises me, she supports me, she loves this city, and her work around environmental justice and making sure that maternal health is something that the city of Chicago pays closer attention to, and particularly for doulas who need so much support as women who are preparing for motherhood, to have that type of support. And again, she's just someone that I have relied upon for a very long period of time. And I think that what's most important is that her love for me and her love for our children, that's her primary responsibility right now, that she is taking hold of, and the work that she'll continue to do with our Commissioner, Sustainability Officer, Angela Tovar, and some of the work that she's doing, again, to bring more attention to maternal health. That work will continue.
Almost out of time, Mayor. How do you want your next 2 years to be defined?
Yeah, so again, I'm grateful that we're moving in the right direction, that violent crime is down in the city of Chicago. Moving forward, I think it's important that we build the safest, most affordable city in America. To have a safe city, but you can't afford to live here, what good does that do? or to be able to afford to live in this city, but you don't feel safe. And so I'm going to do a much better job. It's something that I've learned in these first couple of years, that I can't just expect people to know the good work that we're doing. I got to get out more, have conversations with people as we think about not just policing, but policing and housing, policing and good schools,
Mayor
policing
Johnson's
and mental health.
Going on his own roadshow to tell the people of Chicago what he's doing. Mayor Brandon Johnson, congrats on 2 years. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Stay connected with our reporters and what they're working on by following us on Instagram at WTTW Chicago. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Meet a West Side teen helping to tackle her classmates' hair emergencies right out of her school restroom. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports educational initiatives in the legal profession.